She was looking at herself on the wall. Claire stepped into the living room of a small wooden house on the outskirts of Portland, sent there to survey land for a school project. Her eyes stopped on the oil painting hanging above the fireplace. A woman standing in the rain, a gray coat, a coffee cup in hand, the gaze somewhere far. That face was her face. 7 years ago, a morning in Boston she had nearly forgotten. Footsteps behind her. Daniel stopped. He said nothing. Claire did not turn. Her voice came out so low it almost wasn't there. "You painted me." 3 days earlier, the conference room on the top floor of Bennett Architecture had been quiet in the way rooms grow quiet when a man with power decides to speak softly. Marcus Price had stood at the long window, his back to the harbor, and asked Claire whether she might consider handling the Casco Bay High site survey personally. He framed it as a courtesy to the school board. He framed it as a sign of leadership. Claire knew what it was. A small project, a long drive, a test to see whether the woman who had inherited her father's chair would still bend low enough to measure dirt. She had said yes. Partly because she would not give Marcus the satisfaction of refusal, partly because she had been inside that office, inside that building, inside that title, for too many months without stepping into open air. She had been 37 for 2 weeks. No one in the office had remembered her birthday, and she had not reminded them. She had eaten dinner alone at her desk 3 nights that month, looking at quarterly numbers she already knew by heart. She had begun to suspect, in the small hours, that being the daughter of the man who had built the firm had not made her the chief executive of the firm. It had made her a placeholder until the men her father had trusted decided what they wanted to do with the chair. The drive to Falmouth took 30 minutes. The school sat on a low rise above a stretch of pine and stone. She met the principal first, then a man from the parent council who had been asked to walk the boundary with her. He introduced himself as Daniel Whitmore. He was tall, plainly dressed, soft in voice, and slow to smile. He shook her hand once and let go. She marked him in her notebook as cooperative and unlikely to be a problem. She did not recognize him. A girl ran out of the side door with a folded paper in one hand and called him Dad. He turned, and the seriousness lifted from his face for the length of a breath. The girl's eyes moved to Claire, bright, curious, without fear of the stranger, in a tailored coat. For a moment Claire felt something in her own face that she had not used in a long while. A small, unsupervised smile. Daniel said the pipe she needed to measure ran under the back corner of his property. The only way to mark it accurately was from his yard. He offered to drive ahead. He kept his hands in his pockets when he spoke. On the way back through the town, Claire's phone rang. Her assistant, careful. Marcus had just called an emergency board meeting for the following week. No agenda yet. She thanked him, ended the call, and held the wheel a moment longer than she needed to. The house was a low wooden thing set behind a stand of maples. Inside, the kitchen smelled faintly of oil paint, drifting from somewhere down the hall. A piece of soft piano music was playing low. Lily sat at the dining table with a pencil and a pad. Everything in the room was arranged in a way that did not feel like a man living alone. It felt like a room that someone had once known how to make beautiful, and had not forgotten the grammar. Daniel poured 2 cups of coffee. Claire walked past him into the living room, and there she was. He stopped in the doorway, both cups in his hands. He did not step closer. "You painted me." The sentence stayed in the air, not asking to be answered. Daniel set the coffees down on the side table. He did not deny it. He did not apologize. He said, simply, 7 years ago, a cafe in the North End. You were waiting for someone who didn't come. Claire remembered. The memory rose slowly and out of order. She had been 29. Her father had died 3 days before. The estate lawyer was supposed to meet her at 10. He never made it. Traffic on the Tobin, a flat tire, an apology by phone that came after she had already sat for 2 hours at the window with cold coffee and the rain pressing against the glass. She had forgotten the cafe. She had forgotten the rain. She had forgotten almost everything about that morning, except the way her father's voice had sounded the last time she heard it. Daniel did not mention her father. He could not have known. He said only that he had been sitting 3 tables away, sketching another cup, and had looked up. She had been there. Claire asked him who he was. He took a breath the way men take breaths when they have not said something out loud for a long time. He told her that he had been a painter once, not an art teacher. The portrait had been shown at the Whitmore Gallery in Manhattan the following spring, under a name that was not hers. The Woman in October Rain. It had sold to a private collector for $80,000. He had bought it back, years later, after his wife died, and brought it home. Claire sat down without meaning to. Her hand found the arm of the chair and stayed there. She did not know what she was supposed to feel. Watched, trespassed, seen, all of it. Lily came in from the hall with a finished drawing held up like a small flag. A cat, 6 legs. She offered it to Claire with the certainty of a child who has not yet learned that not everyone wants to be given things. Claire took the page. Her fingers shook, just enough that she felt it and Daniel did not. She told Lily it was a very good cat. Lily smiled and ran back to her room. Daniel stood. He followed his daughter down the hall and came back a minute later. By then, Claire was already by the door, her coat over her arm. She told him she needed time. He nodded. He did not try to keep her there. She drove back into the city with the harbor on her left and a low ceiling of cloud over the road. Yellow streetlights swept across the windshield. She did not put on music. The face she could not stop thinking about was a face she no longer recognized as her own. At the office, she opened her laptop. An email from Marcus sat at the top of the inbox. He had formally moved that the board appoint an interim chief executive for the coming quarter, citing concerns about the current chief executive's mental health. Attached was a psychological assessment signed by a doctor she had never met. Her hand closed slowly around the edge of the desk. In the small wooden house at the edge of Falmouth, Daniel stood in front of the painting, his fingertips just touching the frame. The same yellow October light came in low through the window. 2 people were looking at 2 sides of the same truth. She did not go back to his house the next morning. She arrived at the office before sunrise, her hair still damp from the shower, and she called her personal attorney. She wanted Marcus investigated. She wanted the doctor traced. She wanted everything documented and nothing leaked. After that, she made a second call. She asked her assistant to quietly find out what he could about a painter named Daniel Whitmore, active roughly 2010 through 2018, portraits primarily. She did not say why. The assistant did not ask. At Casco Bay High, Daniel stood in front of his morning class and did a thing he had not done in years. He lost his place. He had been blocking in a demonstration sketch on the easel, and his hand simply stopped moving. A student raised her hand and asked, politely, why he had not finished. He apologized. He started again. At recess, he sat on the concrete steps near the gym and looked at his phone. Eleanor Hayes had sent him a text after 7 years of silence. She has called me. She knows the gallery. What do you want me to say? He did not answer right away. That afternoon, Claire came back to the school without warning. She found him in the art room, the door propped open with a rubber wedge. On the desk near the window were 3 small sketches that were not student work. They were of Lily reading, Lily at a sink, Lily laughing at something off the page. Claire stood over them and looked for a long time. She did not bring up the painting in the living room. She spoke about the project, the boundary, the pipe, the timeline. She wanted to keep working with him if he was willing. Her tone was the tone of a chief executive talking to a contractor she trusted. Daniel understood the gift in it. He said yes. She paused at the door on the way out. She did not turn around. You never asked my name that day. Why did you still paint me? Daniel kept his hands flat on the desk. Because some faces don't need a name for you to know they matter. She walked out. She did not let him see that she had bitten the inside of her lip. That evening, Marcus took her to dinner at a steakhouse on the waterfront. He was wearing the smile of a man who believed he was speaking with the daughter of an old friend. He spoke about pressure. He spoke about the weight of the chair. He spoke gently about her well-being. Claire smiled, ordered the most expensive thing on the menu, and listened. When he said the words mental health, she set her knife down. She asked him quite calmly whether he would like to repeat that phrase on a recording. He did not answer. The waiter came with bread. The meal ended early. On the way back into the city, she pulled the car over at Eastern Promenade and sat with the engine off. The harbor was black. The lights of the islands shifted in the wind. She picked up her phone. She typed a message to Daniel. She deleted it. She typed it again. She deleted it again. What she finally sent was this. Lily drew a beautiful cat with 6 legs. Please tell her thank you. Daniel received it at 11. He sat in the living room for a long while in front of the portrait, the phone face down on his knee. He did not reply. He went into the studio at the end of the hall, took out a fresh page, and began to sketch a different woman in a different light. The land survey was not yet finished. Claire came back the following Saturday morning, her boots already wet from the grass at the edge of the driveway. Lily was at a children's drawing class in town. They had an hour alone in the house. They walked the back lot. They measured the pipe. They worked. When they came back inside, she stopped in the hallway in front of the closed door at the end. She did not ask. She only looked at it. Daniel reached past her shoulder and opened it. Inside was a studio, not the hobby corner of a man who taught art to 14-year-olds. A proper room. Oil tubes lined up by value, blues sorted from cool to warm, whites in their own row, stretched canvases stacked along the wall in 3 depths. Dozens of pencil studies pinned in clean rows above the workbench. A north-facing window had been cut into what used to be a closet. On the easel was a half-finished portrait of Lily in sunlight, the face nearly done, the hands still ghosts. The smell in the room was older than the smell in the hallway. Linseed, damar. Something quieter underneath, the dry smell of paper that had been touched many times. There was no dust. The floor had been swept that week. Claire understood then that he had never stopped working. He had only stopped letting anyone see. She asked him quietly why he had stopped. Daniel kept his eyes on the easel. He told her his wife, Sarah, had died in childbirth. He had not been able to lift a brush for 2 years. When he could lift one again, he did not want to go back to the rooms he had come from. He wanted to be near his daughter, teach high schoolers how to mix a flesh tone, and live quietly. He said it without drama, the way a man says a fact that has stopped breaking him every morning. Claire did not look at him while he spoke. She kept her eyes on a small, unfinished landscape pinned to the wall. A field. Late autumn. No figures. When he finished, she nodded once. She did not say, "I'm sorry." He would have heard it as a small kindness and a small lie. She said only, after a moment, "Lily looks like you when she concentrates." She asked him, then, why he had bought the portrait of her. He was silent for a long while. "Because it was the last thing I painted before my life changed. I didn't want it hanging in a stranger's house." He did not say more. She did not press. She moved slowly through the room. She did not touch anything. She paused at a stack of canvases turned to the wall. She did not turn them. She had not been given permission. She let her hand rest for a moment on the wooden edge of the workbench, the way a person rests a hand on the rail of a bridge. In the car on the way back to the highway, Claire checked her phone. Her attorney had sent a preliminary report. The doctor who had signed the fraudulent assessment was a trustee on a small private foundation. Marcus Price sat on the same foundation's board, enough to file a complaint. Not enough to remove him. She pulled into the driveway again before she had quite decided to. Lily was just being dropped off by another mother. The girl saw the car and waved through the window with both hands. Claire waved back. She realized with no warning that she had not cried in 6 months, and that she was on the edge of it now because of a wave from a child. She drove off. She already knew she would come back. 2 weeks passed. The boundary survey was finished. The school project moved into design. Claire kept inventing reasons to come by the house. A signature on a form that an email would have handled, a question about setbacks she could have asked the principal, a folder she had forgotten, and not really forgotten. One evening Daniel asked her to stay for dinner. Lily pulled at her sleeve and said please in the long, melodic way of a child who already knew the answer. Claire stayed. She sat in the 3rd chair at the table, the chair Sarah had used. Daniel did not say so. Claire did not ask. The meal was simple. Roast chicken. Bread Daniel had baked that morning. A green salad Lily had been allowed to dress. The kitchen lights were yellow. Through the window, the maples in the backyard had gone the color of rust. Claire watched the way Daniel cut Lily's chicken for her without thinking about it, the way his hand moved through a routine that had been a routine for a long time. Lily told a long story about a boy in her class who could whistle through his teeth. She announced she had drawn a horse with 2 wings. Daniel said the word gently. Pegasus. Lily repeated it. It was a hard word, and she liked it. She tried it 3 more times before the end of the meal, each time more confident than the last. Claire asked Lily what color the horse had been. Lily said gray, like the sky in the mornings before it decided what to do. Daniel met Claire's eyes across the table. Neither of them looked away too quickly. After dinner, Lily went to bed. Daniel washed. Claire dried. Their hands brushed when she reached for the last plate. Neither pulled away too quickly. Neither held too long. They sat in the living room. Daniel brought tea. He took the chair across from her, not the one beside her. Sea fog was rising past the window in slow shelves. Neither spoke for a while. She asked him, finally, if he regretted walking away from the painting world. He said he regretted many things. Not that. He asked her, in turn, whether she regretted the chair she had taken at Bennett. She did not answer right away. Then she said, I'm not sure I ever had a choice. He did not try to console her. He poured more tea. She told him then about the year after her father had died. The way the building had felt larger than it had ever been. The way men she had known since she was 9 years old had stopped meeting her eye in the elevator. The way Marcus had begun saying her father's name as a sentence by itself. The way you say a closing argument. She had not told this to anyone. She had not known she was going to say it that evening either. Daniel listened the way he had listened when she stood in front of the painting in his living room. He did not interrupt. He did not flinch. When she had finished, he said only, it must have been very loud, being that alone. She did not know how to answer that. She drank her tea. On the way home, her attorney called. Marcus had moved the board meeting up 5 days. Claire's hand tightened on the wheel. She did not feel afraid. For the first time in 6 months, the tightening was not fear. In the house, Daniel stood in front of the easel. The sketch he had begun the night of the 6-legged cat had moved on without him quite noticing. It was not the woman in the rain. It was the woman at his kitchen table, looking up, the light coming in low and yellow from the lamp. He could not finish it. He was not ready. The next morning, before the school bell, Eleanor Hayes called him. She did not ask after Lily. She got to it. Someone had approached her about buying the woman in October Rain. The offer was large. The buyer was a holding company in Delaware. The name on the records had just been matched, that morning, by Claire's attorney, to Marcus Price. Daniel understood within the time it took to draw a breath. Marcus had not stopped at the doctor. He had researched Claire. He had found the painting. He intended to use it not for ransom, not for money. He intended to build a story, a chief executive with a quiet, undisclosed relationship with a reclusive painter, a portrait of her hanging unattributed in his house, enough to put the fraudulent psychological assessment in better light, enough to take her chair away from her in a single meeting. He called Claire. She did not ask him to come to the house. She asked him to come to her office. It was the first time he had crossed into her territory. He told her everything. He apologized for not foreseeing that keeping the painting could become a weapon someone else might pick up. Claire was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "You don't owe me an apology. I need you to help me." Daniel called Eleanor. She drove down from Brunswick that afternoon. She was 62, slight, with the upright posture of someone who had spent her life inside small rooms making large decisions. She set a folder on the conference table between the three of them. The folder was not about Daniel. It was about Claire's father. Eleanor spoke carefully. Robert Bennett had bought the woman in October Rain from the Whitmore Gallery in 2018, not under his name. Through a private collector who served as a screen, he had known. Her father had known about the painting. He had never told her, because he had wanted her to find it herself on a road of her own. He had written into his will that if she had not found it within 10 years, the painting would pass to the Bennett Foundation, a small arts education trust he had quietly endowed in the last year of his life. When her father died, Eleanor had been the one who sold the painting back to Daniel. At Robert's instruction, Daniel had not known. He had believed the seller was an anonymous estate. Claire did not cry. She sat very straight. After a long moment, she put her hand flat on the folder and thanked Eleanor in a voice she had not used since the day her father died, the voice of a daughter, not the voice of a chief executive. The folder held something else. Emails, 3 years of them, between Marcus Price and a real estate developer in Boston. Marcus had been quietly selling internal information on Bennett Architecture's bids since the season after Robert's funeral. Eleanor had the messages because she had once been the art advisor to Marcus's wife. The wife had handed her the folder before the divorce, in case it is ever needed. Claire's father had not left her. A man who had not known how to say the words "I love you" had chosen a quieter way to say them. He had bought a painting of his daughter standing alone in the rain, and he had waited for her to grow up enough to find it, she thought, sitting in that conference room, of every birthday card he had signed with only his first initial, every graduation he had attended without applauding, every Christmas he had given her a book instead of speaking. She had spent her 20s believing he did not know how to love her. She had been wrong in a way she could not undo. She could only sit very still and let the wrongness rearrange the furniture inside her. Daniel sat beside her while she read every page. He did not touch her. He stayed. The board meeting opened at 9 on Thursday morning in the conference room on the top floor. The windows looked out on the harbor. 12 members took their seats around the long table. Marcus sat at the head. He looked rested. He looked confident. He began. He spoke of his concerns, formally, for the record. He presented the psychological assessment with the calm of a man who had not yet realized he had walked into the wrong room. He proposed the appointment of an interim chief executive for the coming quarter. 2 members nodded. 4 were silent. 6 were waiting for Claire. Claire stood. She did not argue with the assessment. She put 3 documents on the screen behind her. The first was her actual medical record, pulled with her consent and signed by her real physician. No diagnoses, no medications, no history of crisis. The second was the contract between the fraudulent doctor and a small private foundation. The third was a list of the trustees of that foundation. Marcus Price, underlined. The room went quiet in a particular way. Marcus stood and said, loud enough for the table to hear, that this was a personal attack. Claire did not answer him. She advanced the slide. 3 years of emails. Names of bids Bennett Architecture had lost narrowly. Names of competing firms. Wire confirmations. Internal documents that should never have left the building. Marcus sat down again. He sat down without meaning to. Claire advanced 1 more slide. The Woman in October Rain. The provenance underneath it traced the painting from the Whitmore Gallery to Robert Bennett to the Bennett Foundation, with a note that it currently hung under Eleanor Hayes's stewardship at the home of Daniel Whitmore until the foundation's spaces were open. Claire did not explain that the woman in the painting was her. She did not need to. She said simply, "My father spent the last 10 years of his life investing in art, not as decoration. As construction, I intend to continue his work." She offered the board 2 paths. They could vote, with the evidence in front of them, to remove Marcus Price, or she would resign before lunch and deliver everything in the folder to the Securities and Exchange Commission. She did not raise her voice. She did not move from where she was standing. She waited. 11 votes to remove. 1 abstention. Marcus did not speak when the security officer stepped to the side of his chair. He simply gathered the papers in front of him with both hands, as if he no longer trusted one of them to do it alone. The door closed behind him. Claire stayed standing. The low October sunlight fell on her face from the window. Beyond the glass were the cranes of the working pier, the bones of a ferry, a strip of fog above the bay. She did not feel triumphant. She felt still. For a moment, she stood there alone in the room, the board members not quite ready to look at her yet, papers shuffling in their hands the way papers shuffle when no one wants to be the first to speak. She thought with no warning of her father. He had stood in this same room 100 times, in this same window light, and she had been small and had watched him from the chair in the corner where Marcus had been sitting that morning. She did not know, until that moment, that she had been carrying her father's voice in her chest all day. She walked out into the hallway. Daniel was at the far end of it. He had come and waited there. He had not gone in. He did not ask how it had gone. She walked toward him. She did not cry. She did not embrace him. She only stopped beside him, close enough that her shoulder touched his. He said, very quietly, "Lily wanted to know if you were coming to dinner." Claire said, "Yes." The news about Marcus moved through Portland in 48 hours. By Monday, a small story had run in the business section of the Press Herald. By Wednesday, Bennett Architecture had announced an internal audit. By the following week, Claire had appointed a new chief operating officer, a woman her father had trusted, who had left the firm 2 years before in quiet disagreement with Marcus. The restructuring began. For the first time since her father's funeral, Claire walked into the office in the morning without the small, low feeling under her ribs that she was about to be asked to leave. The building did not feel like her father's anymore. It did not feel like Marcus's. It had begun. slowly and without ceremony, to feel like a place she was allowed to work. Daniel returned to his teaching. One morning the principal stopped him in the hallway and handed him a printed clipping from the Press Herald. The Bennett Foundation had announced a small exhibition for the following spring. The Woman in October Rain would be at its center, attributed to a painter who had stepped away from the public eye some years before. The clipping did not name the woman in the portrait. The principal looked at him for a long moment. "Do you know him?" Daniel only smiled. He did not answer. Claire spent a weekend in her father's old office. She had not been able to set foot in it since the funeral. The shelves were still as he had left them. The blotter still had his last day's writing on it. In the bottom drawer she found a small leather notebook, page after page of art she had not known he owned. Young painters, mid-career sculptors, a photographer in Lewiston, a glassblower in Camden, quiet purchases over 10 years. He had been a patron she had not known. The last page of the notebook had a single line in her father's handwriting. The date was 3 months before his death. The line read, "For her, when she is ready to see." There was no name. There did not need to be one. She closed the notebook. She put both hands flat on the desk and breathed in slowly, the way she had been taught to breathe when she was 12 and had her first speech to give, and her father had told her that breath was the only thing that had ever stopped him from saying something stupid. She cried for the first time in a year. Not loud, not long, but she cried. That evening she drove to the house in Falmouth without saying she was coming. Lily was already asleep. Daniel opened the door and did not ask why she was there. He made tea. They sat in the living room, under the portrait. She told him about the notebook. She told him she had not known her father. Daniel was quiet for a while. Then he said, "Sometimes people don't need to be understood to be loved." Claire said nothing for a long minute. Then, "You painted me in a way my father never could. You saw me." Daniel looked at her. "Your father saw you. He just didn't know how to tell you." She set the cup down. She rested her head against the back of the chair, her eyes closed. He did not wake her. He took a folded throw from the chair beside her and laid it carefully across her. He sat across from her with a book in his hands and read until the windows began to turn gray. Lily woke first. She found Claire asleep on the couch. She did not ask why. She went into the kitchen and got a piece of paper. When Claire opened her eyes, there was a fresh drawing on the coffee table beside her cooling cup of tea. 3 figures, a tall man, a small girl, a woman between them with a coffee cup in her hand. 6 months later, the Bennett Foundation opened its first exhibition in a back gallery at the Portland Museum of Art. At the center was the work of Daniel Whitmore, a painter the art world had quietly assumed it had lost. The space the foundation had been given was small by museum standards, 3 connected rooms with high ceilings and dark wooden floors. Eleanor had handled the hang herself. She had refused help. She had wanted the order of the paintings to read like a sentence, and she did not trust anyone else to know where the punctuation went. Daniel had agreed to attend, not out of ambition. Eleanor had told him, simply, "Some stories don't end until you let them end." He had understood. The opening was full. Lily wore a blue dress and held her father's hand at the door. Claire arrived in dark clothes, but lighter than she had been 8 months before. She came in as the chair of the foundation. The press was respectful. Her answers were short. There was a board member from Boston who tried, twice, to draw her into a longer interview. She redirected him, both times, toward the painters. She said the evening was not about the foundation's leadership. She said it was about the people who had been making the work while no one had been looking. The Woman in October Rain hung in the center of the main room. There was a small card next to it, smaller than the other cards in the room. It read, simply, "For the one who waited long enough to be found." No name for the woman in the portrait, no name for the painter, just the line. Claire stood in front of it for a long while. Daniel stood 3 steps back. He let her have the moment with the painting and with herself. She had not, until that night, allowed herself to look at the portrait the way other people looked at it, as a stranger would. The woman in the painting was younger than she remembered being. The woman in the painting was not waiting for a lawyer. The woman in the painting was waiting for someone to walk into the cafe and sit down across from her, and the painter had understood, somehow, that she had stopped expecting it. The face was not sad. The face was tired in a way that had outgrown sadness. A reporter from a regional magazine asked Daniel why he had come back. He thought a moment. "I didn't come back," he said. "I never really left." Lily detached from her father's side and walked across the floor to Claire. She slipped her small hand into Claire's. She looked up at the painting, and then at Claire. "Do you know her?" Claire smiled and crouched down so her face was level with the girl's. "I'm learning to." Lily considered this. She nodded. The way children nod when they have decided to accept a piece of information without yet understanding it. Then she said, "I like her coat." Claire laughed. It was a small laugh, and it surprised her more than it surprised anyone else in the room. Daniel walked over. The three of them stood in front of the portrait. None of them spoke. A photographer from the foundation took a single picture, not for the program, not for the press. He would give the print to Claire the following week, in an envelope without a card. The gallery lights were warm. Outside the tall museum windows, the night was April, not October. The sea fog was gone. The air had begun to carry the first thin smell of spring. A year later, October again. Boston. The same cafe in the North End. Daniel and Claire sat at the small table by the window. They had not come back to remember. Claire had been in the city for 2 days of meetings, and Daniel had driven down to bring her home. The rain was steady against the glass. The cafe had changed a little in 7 years. New chairs. A new espresso machine, taller and louder than the old one. The corner where Daniel had been sitting that morning was now a low shelf of cookbooks. The window seat was still the window seat. The light at the window was still the same light. He had brought a sketchbook with him. He did not open it right away. He set it on the table between them, and that was the gesture. Claire watched the rain. She said, "After a while, I've thought about my father a lot this year." Daniel did not interrupt. She went on, "I think he picked you. By buying that painting, I think he knew that one day I would need someone who wasn't afraid of how quiet I get." Daniel did not answer. He laid his hand flat on the table, palm up. Claire put her hand on top of his. She did not grip it. He did not close around it. It was only a placing down. It was enough. Outside, the rain came harder. Inside, the room was warm. The waiter brought 2 cups of coffee and set them carefully on the wooden table. Lily was at Eleanor's for the weekend, Daniel said. He smiled, just a little. She had started calling Claire by name now. Not Miss Bennet, just Claire. Without anyone prompting her, Claire heard it, and her face changed in a small way that was not quite a smile. She did not move her hand. He told her, too, that Lily had asked, the week before, whether Claire would come with them in the summer to the small lake in western Maine, where they had been going since Sarah died. He had not promised the girl an answer. He had said he would ask. Claire listened. She nodded once. She said she would like to go. Daniel opened the sketchbook. The first page held the original study of Claire from 7 years before. He had never shown it to anyone. The lines were lighter than the lines of the finished painting. The face was less guarded. The woman in the sketch had not yet learned that the lawyer was not coming. The second page held the sketch of her at his kitchen table, the night of the autumn fog. The face in this one had begun to soften at the edges. The eyes were still tired. The mouth had begun to remember the shape of small kindness. The third page was blank. He said nothing. He only left the book open between the 2 cups of coffee. Claire looked at the blank page for a long time. Then she said very quietly, "The third page. What are you waiting for?" Daniel looked at the page, not at her. "For you to not need to stand in the rain anymore." Claire smiled. For the first time in years, she smiled at something that was not work. Outside, the rain went on. Inside, they sat across from each other, hand resting on hand, and did not say anything else. Neither of them had been looking.